What happens when one of hip-hop's most successful moguls sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to find himself facing a host who seems determined to tear him down on live television? Tonight we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had 50 Cent walking off The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, leaving millions of viewers stunned and the entertainment world buzzing. This wasn't your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how a host can completely derail what should have been a celebration of success. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story is absolutely wild. Curtis Jackson, better known to the world as 50 Cent, had arrived at the Ed Sullivan Theater that evening, riding high on a wave of unprecedented success. Latest business venture, a premium cognac brand, had just secured a distribution deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His television production company was dominating streaming platforms with gritty dramas that critics were calling revolutionary. The man who had survived 9 gunshots and built an empire from the streets of Queens was at the absolute peak of his career. Stephen Colbert's production team had reached out months earlier, pitching this as the perfect opportunity to showcase 50 Cent's evolution from rapper to business titan. The booking seemed like a win for everyone involved. Colbert would get a ratings boost from having one of hip-hop's biggest names on his show, while 50 Cent would have a platform to discuss his latest ventures with an audience that might not typically follow his career. But from the moment the cameras started rolling, something felt off. Colbert's usual charm seemed forced, his smile a little too wide, his energy strangely aggressive. The audience, packed with fans who had waited hours for tickets, sensed the tension immediately. What they were about to witness would become one of the most talked-about late-night television moments in recent memory. The interview began, innocuously enough, with Colbert introducing 50 Cent as a multi-platinum artist and successful entrepreneur. But keen observers noticed subtle digs embedded in seemingly complimentary statements. When discussing the cognac business, Colbert mentioned how surprising it was to see someone from 50 Cent's background succeed in such an upscale market. The comment, delivered with Colbert's signature smirk, drew uncomfortable silence from the audience. 50 Cent, ever the professional, maintained his composure and redirected the conversation toward the quality of his product and the rigorous process behind its creation. He spoke passionately about working with master distillers in France, about understanding terroir and aging processes, demonstrating a level of expertise that clearly irritated Colbert. The host's follow-up questions became increasingly pointed, questioning whether 50 Cent was truly involved in the creation process or simply lending his name to products developed by others. The tension in the studio was palpable. Audience members began shifting uncomfortably in their seats as Colbert's questions grew more confrontational. When 50 Cent attempted to discuss his television production company's commitment to authentic storytelling, Colbert interrupted with a comment about glorifying violence and whether someone with 50 Cent's past should be creating content that might influence young viewers. That's when the mask truly came off. 50 Cent leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to barely contained frustration. He had sat through dozens of interviews throughout his career, faced hostile journalists, and skeptical business partners, but something about Colbert's approach felt particularly disrespectful. The host seemed determined to undermine every accomplishment, to reduce a complex business empire to street credibility and lucky breaks. Colbert pressed further, bringing up 50 Cent's past feuds with other artists and suggesting they were publicity stunts designed to maintain relevance. The comment struck a nerve because it demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of 50 Cent's current position in the entertainment industry. This wasn't someone desperately clinging to past glory. This was a mogul who had successfully transitioned from music to multiple business ventures worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The audience could feel the shift in energy. What had started as typical late-night banter was evolving into something much more serious. 50 Cent's responses became more direct, his tone sharper. He began calling out Colbert's assumptions directly, pointing out the research failures that led to such misguided questions. When Colbert suggested that 50 Cent's success might be attributed more to luck than skill, the rapper-entrepreneur's patience finally began wearing thin. The breaking point came when Colbert, apparently encouraged by getting under his guest's skin, decided to push even harder. He brought up 50 Cent's bankruptcy filing from years earlier, framing it as evidence of poor business judgment rather than the strategic financial maneuver it actually was. The comment was not only inaccurate, but seemed designed specifically to embarrass 50 Cent in front of millions of viewers. For a moment, complete silence filled the studio. The audience held its breath, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. 50 Cent stared at Colbert with an intensity that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. The cameras captured every nuance of his expression as he processed what had just happened. This wasn't journalistic inquiry or playful late-night ribbing. This was a deliberate attempt to humiliate a successful black entrepreneur on national television. When 50 Cent finally spoke, his voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge. He began methodically dismantling Colbert's premise, explaining how strategic bankruptcy can be used to protect assets during litigation. His response demonstrated not only business acumen but also highlighted how Colbert's question revealed either ignorance or malicious intent. The host, clearly not expecting such a detailed and articulate response, began interrupting and trying to redirect the conversation. But 50 Cent wasn't finished. He had spent his entire career fighting to be taken seriously as more than just a rapper, building legitimate businesses and creating opportunities for others. To have a privileged television host dismiss those accomplishments with uninformed commentary was unacceptable. The man who had survived assassination attempts and corporate boardroom battles wasn't about to let Stephen Colbert disrespect him without consequences. What happened next would forever change how people viewed Stephen Colbert's interview style. As 50 Cent methodically exposed the flaws in Colbert's attack, the host's facade of comedic charm completely crumbled. Instead of acknowledging his mistake or pivoting to more substantive questions, Colbert doubled down with a comment that crossed every line of professional decorum. "Well," Curtis Colbert said, emphasizing the use of 50 Cent's real name in a way that felt deliberately dismissive. "Maybe if you spent less time playing gangster and more time studying actual business principles, you wouldn't need to rely on bankruptcy courts to solve your problems." The studio fell silent. Even Colbert's house band stopped their usual background flourishes, sensing they had just witnessed something that went far beyond acceptable television discourse. 50 Cent's expression shifted in a way that anyone familiar with his career would recognize. This wasn't anger. It was the cold calculation of someone who had survived street warfare and corporate battlefields. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet intensity that had made him legendary in both music and business circles. "Stephen, I need you to understand something," 50 Cent began, leaning forward slightly. "I've built a multimedia empire worth more than most Fortune 500 companies. I've created jobs for thousands of people and generated billions in revenue across multiple industries. But you're sitting here trying to reduce me to some stereotype because that's easier for you to understand than accepting that maybe you didn't do your homework before this interview." The audience erupted in applause, but Colbert seemed oblivious to the shift in room dynamics. Instead of gracefully accepting the correction, he pressed forward with even more inflammatory rhetoric. "Come on, let's be honest about what you really are," Colbert said with a smirk that revealed his true intentions. "You're a rapper who got lucky with some investments. The tough guy act might work for your audience, but we both know you're just playing a character." That comment landed like a bombshell. Calling 50 Cent's authenticity into question wasn't just professionally insulting, it was personally devastating. This was a man who had overcome poverty, survived multiple assassination attempts, and built legitimate businesses through intelligence and determination. To suggest it was all an act demonstrated either profound ignorance or deliberate malice. The camera captured 50 Cent's reaction in stark detail. For several seconds, he simply stared at Colbert with an expression that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. The silence stretched on until audience members began shifting nervously in their seats. When 50 Cent finally responded, his words cut through the tension like a blade. "You know what, Stephen? I came here tonight thinking I was going to have a conversation with a professional journalist. Instead, I'm sitting across from someone who seems more interested in perpetuating stereotypes than actually learning about the businesses I've built. The disrespect you're showing isn't just toward me, it's toward every entrepreneur who's had to fight for recognition in industries that weren't built for people like us." Colbert, apparently interpreting 50 Cent's controlled response as weakness, decided to escalate further. Oh, please, spare me the victim narrative. You've made millions, rapping about drugs and violence. And now you want to be taken seriously as a businessman. Maybe the problem isn't stereotypes. Maybe the problem is that some people just aren't cut out for legitimate business. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front rows looked genuinely shocked at Colbert's brazen disrespect. What had started as a typical late-night interview had devolved into something that felt deeply personal and racially charged. Colbert's comments weren't just attacking 50 Cent's business acumen, they were suggesting that his background somehow disqualified him from success in legitimate industries. 50 Cent stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. The simple actions sent ripples of tension through the entire studio. "Let me explain something to you about legitimate business," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "I've sat in boardrooms with executives from every major corporation in America. I've closed deals that your entire net worth couldn't finance, and I've done it all while building a brand that reaches millions of people worldwide." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the audience before continuing. "But more importantly, I've done it with integrity and respect for the people I work with. Something you clearly don't understand." The camera captured Colbert's face as the implications of that statement hit home. For the first time since the interview began, the host looked genuinely uncomfortable. Instead of apologizing or attempting to de-escalate, Colbert made what would prove to be his fatal mistake: integrity. That's rich coming from someone whose entire career was built on promoting the same violence that's destroying communities across America. Maybe instead of lecturing me about business ethics, you should consider the damage your music has done to impressionable young people. The accusation was so far beyond acceptable bounds that even Colbert's production team looked horrified. Suggesting that 50 Cent was personally responsible for societal violence wasn't just wrong. It was the kind of inflammatory rhetoric that destroyed careers and reputations. The audience's earlier discomfort had transformed into genuine anger, with several people booing audibly. 50 Cent's response was swift and devastating. "Stephen, you just revealed everything anyone needs to know about your character and your show. You invited me here under false pretenses, pretending this would be a legitimate interview about my business ventures. Instead, you've spent the entire time trying to tear down a successful black entrepreneur with racist stereotypes and personal attacks." He gestured toward the audience, many of whom were nodding in agreement. "These people came here expecting to see professional television. Instead, they're watching you embarrass yourself and your network with behavior that belongs in the worst corners of social media, not on a major television show." Colbert, perhaps finally realizing how badly he had miscalculated, attempted to backtrack. "Now wait a minute. I never said anything about race. I'm simply asking legitimate questions about your background and business practices." But his defensive tone only confirmed what everyone in the studio already knew. He had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "You don't get to hide behind plausible deniability," 50 Cent shot back immediately. "Everyone watching this understands exactly what you've been doing. You've systematically attacked my credibility, questioned my intelligence, and suggested that my success is somehow illegitimate. That's not journalism. That's character assassination." The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Colbert's production team was frantically signaling for a commercial break, but 50 Cent wasn't finished. He had endured enough disrespect for one evening, and millions of viewers were about to witness exactly what happens when someone pushes Curtis Jackson too far. What came next was a verbal destruction so complete that it left Stephen Colbert speechless and fundamentally changed how the entertainment industry viewed late-night television ethics. 50 Cent, now standing at full height, delivered what would become one of the most quoted responses in television history. "Stephen, you've made a critical error tonight that's going to follow you for the rest of your career." 50 Cent began, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him legendary. In boardrooms and recording studios alike, you assumed that because I came from the streets, I wouldn't have the intelligence or composure to handle your little game. You thought you could disrespect me on national television, and I'd just sit here and take it like some grateful guest, who should be thankful for the opportunity. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Even the production crew had stopped their usual bustling, mesmerized by the controlled intensity radiating from 50 Cent. Colbert sat frozen in his chair, apparently realizing for the first time that he had severely underestimated his guest. "But here's what you failed to understand," 50 Cent continued, his tone growing more forceful. "I didn't survive 9 gunshots, build a multimedia empire, and create thousands of jobs by being weak or stupid. I got here by being smarter, tougher, and more strategic than people who underestimated me. People exactly like you." He pointed directly at Colbert, the gesture carrying unmistakable authority. "You've spent this entire interview trying to reduce me to stereotypes, because that's easier for your limited perspective to process. A successful black entrepreneur challenges your worldview, so instead of celebrating achievement, you attack it." Colbert finally found his voice, but his response only made things worse. "I think you're being overly sensitive. This is comedy, television, not some corporate boardroom. Maybe you should learn to take a joke." The comment revealed just how tone-deaf he had become to the situation unfolding around him. 50 Cent's laugh was cold and humorless. "A joke, Stephen. You just called my life's work illegitimate on national television. You suggested that my success was based on luck rather than intelligence and hard work. You questioned my integrity and blamed me for societal problems I've actually worked to solve. If that's your idea of comedy, then you need better writers." The audience erupted in applause, several people standing to show their support for 50 Cent, the camera captured. Colbert's increasingly uncomfortable expression as he realized how badly he had misjudged both his guest and his audience. "You know what the real joke is?" 50 Cent asked, his voice rising slightly. "The joke is that you invited one of the most successful entrepreneurs in entertainment history onto your show. And instead of learning something, instead of having an intelligent conversation, you chose to embarrass yourself with ignorant attacks and amateur-hour journalism." He began moving toward the edge of the interview area, his body language making his intentions clear. "I've sat in meetings with Fortune 500 CEOs who treated me with more respect than you've shown tonight. I've negotiated deals worth more money than you'll see in your lifetime, and I've done it all while maintaining my dignity and treating people professionally." Colbert made one final desperate attempt to regain control. "Wait, where are you going? We're not finished with the interview." His plaintive tone revealed just how completely the power dynamic had shifted. "We were finished the moment you decided to attack my character instead of engaging with my ideas. This interview is over, because I don't waste time with people who don't deserve my respect." The studio erupted as 50 Cent began removing his microphone. Audience members were on their feet, many applauding his decision to walk away. The cameras captured every moment as one of hip-hop's most successful moguls demonstrated exactly how to handle disrespect with class and authority. "Stephen, let me leave you with something to think about," 50 Cent said, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned studio. "Success isn't about where you come from, it's about where you're going and how you treat people along the way. Tonight, you've shown everyone exactly what kind of person you really are. Good luck explaining this to your network executives," he added, with a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. As 50 Cent walked toward the exit, the audience's applause grew thunderous. Several people stood and began chanting his name, transforming what should have been Colbert's moment into a celebration of someone who refused to accept disrespect. The cameras followed every step as 50 Cent moved with the confidence of someone who had just delivered a masterclass in dignity under pressure. Colbert sat speechless in his chair, the weight of his mistakes finally becoming clear. His production team scrambled to figure out how to handle the remaining airtime, while the audience continued showing their support for the departing guest. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. A successful entrepreneur walking away with his head held high, leaving behind a host who had revealed his true character on national television. The studio doors closed behind 50 Cent with a finality that seemed to echo through the entire building. What had started as a routine late-night interview had become a defining moment that would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. In less than 30 minutes, Stephen Colbert had managed to transform what should have been a celebration of success into a cautionary tale about the consequences of unprofessional behavior. The audience gradually quieted, but the energy in the room remained electric. Everyone present knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. A moment when a guest refused to accept disrespect and chose dignity over television exposure. As the cameras continued rolling, it became clear that this interview would be remembered not for anything the host had accomplished, but for how spectacularly he had failed. So what do you think? Was 50 Cent right to walk away from Stephen Colbert's disrespectful interview? Or should he have stayed and tried to work through the conflict? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from the entertainment world that you won't believe actually happened.